So welcome to our session on child protection, understanding my responsibilities. What you need to be aware of is the Children's Services legislation, and the particular legislation that is relevant to child protection is the National Education and Care Services Regs and Law, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, the National Quality Standard, and specifically 2.3.4, and it actually states action is taken to respond to every child at risk of abuse and or neglect. And we have the Children, Young Persons Care and Protection Act. That actually talks about you as a mandatory reporter and the use of the MRG, which is the Mandatory Reporter Guidance Tool, and I'll show you that later on. Chapter 16A and Section 23, the definition of significant risk of harm. Now, I just want to sort of briefly go over some of these because I want you to understand that your role as a mandatory reporter and someone who is advocating for the rights of children is very clear amongst all of this legislation. And as you can see, we've got 4 significant pieces of legislation here. So you should be really clear what your responsibilities are. With the Education and Care Services Regs and Law, you do need to protect children, and obviously if you choose not to and choose not to follow what the MRG, the Mandatory Reporter Guidance Tool, tells you, then you are actually in breach of this legislation as well as this legislation. Now that there is a law attached, you can obviously be personally fined and the centre can be fined. So say, for example, you have got concerns about a child and you complete the MRG and the MRG says this is now reportable and you choose not to report it because either your manager says don't or you feel worried or scared about doing that. And then the parents maybe question, have you got concerns about the child, or maybe something comes to the forefront that this child is being abused in some way by a family member or a family friend or someone else, and you actually have records that you've been documenting and you've got the MRG that says you should have reported this, then you can actually be personally liable for that, personally responsible. Because you're actually in breach of the MRG, which is obviously part of this legislation down the bottom here, and you're also in breach of our regulations and our law. So be very mindful that if you do the MRG, which we are meant to do when we have got concerns, it will either come back as saying continue to support the child or document, and that's fine, that's easy to do. Or it might actually say this is reportable. And that means that under this legislation, you must report that. And that means you would contact Child Protection Services, or we can email them, or we can put it through the e-portal, which will come up on the MRG. You can do that on your own, or you can do that with the support of either your room leader or your centre manager. Okay, so you don't have to do that on your own if you're feeling a bit concerned, but what you must understand is that it is your responsibilities as an educator to do this, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. The UN Conventions on the Rights of the Child is basically about saying that we need to make sure every child is free from abuse and obviously has the opportunity for education. And so you should understand what the rights of the child are. If you don't, please have a look at the handout that's been provided to you. You've also got the National Quality Standard, and you should be very, very aware of what the National Quality Standards are. But you should know how to access those, and you should know that you can go to the CQUA website to access those, or obviously ask your centre director because you should obviously have these in your service. Now, the Children, Young Persons Care and Protection Act, I've got sort of listed some of the main key points here. And you've got the role of you as a mandatory reporter and the use of the MRG, and I will show you the MRG at the end. You've also got the exchange of information, Chapter 16A, and what this means is that your service provider, your approved provider, it might be your director, it might be your HR person, the owner of the service, they are able to request information from other services if you've got concerns about a child. Now, obviously, educators can't do this. We can't contact other services, but we need to discuss our concerns with our director so that they can make contact with other services that child may also be in attending or has just left recently, especially if we've got concerns about extremely concerning or challenging behaviour as well as indicators of abuse. And also we have the definition of significant risk of harm, which we will talk about in a moment. What we're going to have a look now is at the definitions, indicators of abuse, and there are several different types of abuse, and obviously we have definitions around those. So when we think about physical abuse, this basically occurs when a child suffers or likely to suffer some type of significant harm from a physical injury. Now, it can be intentional, and an intentional injury may result in things like bruises, cuts, burns, fractures, because a parent maybe has punched the child, kicked the child, thrown the child against a wall, put a cigarette out on the child, held their hand over a stovetop, ripped their hair out, those types of things. It could also be physical torture, so making a child walk around the backyard for hours on end without stopping or without food. It may be strapping a child into a pram for days on end, hours on end, without actually allowing the child to leave that. So it's a physical punishment as well. Some parents, though, will smack their children. And so, while smacking I don't condone, parents are allowed to smack their children, but there are some parameters. And so what I want you to think about is, what do you think the parameters are around smacking? Obviously, as educators, we are not allowed to smack children, but parents may smack their children. What do you think those boundaries are? Have a little think about that. And basically, the parameters around smacking is that if a parent chooses to smack their child because they are misbehaving and they are using it as maybe a last resort, it needs to be done from the shoulders down. You must not smack a child around the head or face. It must be an open hand, so it must not be a closed hand like a fist, and it must not leave a mark. So if the parent smacks their child hard enough and it leaves a welt that can remain there for 20 or 30 minutes or more, bruise, that is an extremely hard hit, and therefore that crosses over into physical abuse. Now, we have to put these into context as well. So some children may come to centre and say, oh, mummy hit me or daddy hit me. And we don't go, oh, they're being abused. What we need to say is, can you tell me what happened when mummy hit you or daddy hit you? We use the child's words. Okay, we don't say, did they hit you with something? They say, what were you being naughty? Okay, we don't ask those types of questions. That creates confusion. We just use the same words the child did. So can you tell me what happened when mummy or daddy hit you? And they might say, oh, we were playing tennis and I walked past and mummy hit me with the racket by mistake. Okay, so that's an accident and that's definitely not reportable. However, if the child actually says, I spilt my orange juice on mummy's rug, got really cranky and she hit me in the back and I fell into the wall, that is obviously very concerning. Now, we don't know if that's happened before. We don't know if it's going to happen again. We don't have the crystal ball. So what we do need to do is document that. We need to put it through the MRG and we need to see what the MRG says. Okay, so it's really important that we don't make judgments ourselves, that we don't try and fix it ourselves, that we don't think that it's maybe only happened once, because we don't know. We don't know if it's happened before. We don't know if it's going to happen again. Now, sexual abuse, this basically occurs when an adult, a carer, it can even be a teenager or even an older child, engages the child in some type of sexual activity. When it is children engaging in this, it usually is because those children are being sexually abused themselves and are trying to act out what's happening to them and try and understand it. Sometimes you may even see teenage children engaging younger children in sexual activity, and that is still obviously a major concern and needs to be documented and obviously reported, especially if the older child is over the age of 16. If they're still under the age of 16, something still needs to be done about it. We need to have conversations with the family because obviously too, there could be something concerning happening with that older child. Now, the sexual abuse may include things such as fondling of the child's genitals, masturbation, oral sex, vaginal or anal penetration by a penis, finger or object, or exposure of the child to pornography. The thing that we have to understand with sexual predators is that it will be someone who has got contact with the child. It will be a parent, grandparent, auntie, uncle, extended family member, cousin, etc. It could be a neighbour. It could be a family friend. It could be someone who is close with that family, such as someone from a sporting club, a coach, church group, whatever it may be. It is someone that is usually in a place of trust so that they have access to the child without other people being around. That person will engage the child in either a loving relationship, so the child becomes confused about what a loving relationship is, and they believe that the behaviours that are happening are because that perpetrator loves the child or cares for them. Or it can be a threatening type relationship where the abuser will say to the child, if you tell anyone, I will also do this to your little brother or sister, or I'll tell mummy and she won't love you anymore. Okay, so the child is then threatened into engaging in those acts. Emotional or psychological abuse. This occurs when a parent or child's caregiver repeatedly rejects or threatens the child and uses words and language or behaviours to frighten them. So this is an attachment that's very cold, that's very ambiguous, that's very insecure. The child is always in a state of anxiety because they're afraid of how the parent is going to respond to them. This is actually going to have a huge impact on the child's physical, social, intellectual and emotional development because they're not receiving that lovely warmth and protection They're not receiving kind words or comfort from the parent. They don't feel safe and secure emotionally with that parent. So you imagine the most important person in your life is continually rejecting you and saying harsh and cold things to you, or even threatening you. This does impact on you, on the anxiety levels, and also impacts on child psychologically and emotionally. Now, neglect usually is the most common. We usually see, smell it. And so this is the failure to provide the child with the basic necessities of life, such as food, clothing, shelter, medical attention, or supervision. That's going to have an impact on the child. So things such as food, they may not be receiving the right types of food, or not enough food, or too much of unhealthy food. I have worked with a child where breakfast, lunch and dinner was fast food. So they would come in with McDonald's. At lunchtime, they wouldn't eat our centre food. So the only food they would eat was either a tomato sauce sandwich on white bread or a cheese sandwich. These children then also go off and have fast food for dinner. So think about the children currently in your care. Think about, have you got concerns about food, whether it's too much of the wrong thing, lots of sugar, high salt food and preservatives? And think about, how does that impact on children's behaviour? So some of you, this may be a really big concern. And if you're working with families with children with extreme challenging behaviours, and you've got concerns about their food intake of being extremely unhealthy, and also children with obesity, and you're seeing that that's impacting upon them in terms of their asthma, the ability to be able to engage in physical activity, these are things that we need to be documenting. These are things we need to be having conversations with our parents about, with our directors. If parents are refusing to go and seek help or even medical attention for these children, and that becomes obviously a concern that we then need to put through the MRG. Children also may need medical attention, so they might have rotten teeth, or they might have a severe nappy rash that is split, bleeding, pussy, etc., where, you know, things like a normal nappy cream is not going to help. They'll need an antibiotic. And if parents are refusing to go and get help, then obviously that needs to be documented and put through the MRG as well, because this parent is actually having a huge impact on their child's well-being and development, especially if we're seeing changes in the child's behaviour and their emotional well-being. I'm just now going to show you the indicators. There's both physical and behavioural indicators for each of the abuse types. I'm not going to go through each one. You can read obviously through your notes, but I'm just going to draw out the main ones. I think what we need to understand is that not every child is going to be abused if we see these indicators. So for example, physical abuse, you might see bruises. Now, children bruise. I sometimes come home and I think, how in the world did I get that bruise on my leg? And you might be the same, but children will come with bruises on their shins, on their legs, even on their arms. It doesn't mean they're being physically abused. What we need to think about is the type of bruise. Is the bruise large? Is it on their torso, their back, their stomach area? That's an unusual space to be. Is it in an unusual shape, such as a long stick, or maybe 4 little round bruises and 1 round bruise sort of on the outside and the inside of their arm, which looks like then a handhold around the child's arm? So be mindful of that. It doesn't mean that every bruise means a child's being physically abused, but we need to think about, hold on, that child just said that mummy did it, or daddy hit them, or so-and-so punched them, or they pushed them, whatever it might be. Is it unusual shaped bruise and they can't explain why? Are we seeing a change in behaviour? So are we seeing now behavioural indicators where the child's becoming, maybe showing regression, maybe starts wetting their pants after being toilet trained, maybe seems like they're becoming shy and withdrawn, maybe their arms and legs, their body's being covered by clothing in warmer weather where they usually don't do that. Okay, so we start to look and see, we're seeing a bit of a change here. Also, to remember, some children can just tell you. So if a child tells you that someone did it, you might ask a question such as, can you tell me what happened this morning, or tell me what happened last night? And obviously gather more information that way. And obviously document everything. Some of the other physical indicators, you might see burns, you might see lacerations, you might see welts on the child. Some of the other behavioural indicators you might see are things such as avoidance of physical contact, because, you know, once I remember sitting at the Play-Doh table with the child and I went to stand up to answer the phone and the child cowered and sort of moved away. And I did have a concern about this child, and I thought that's a really unusual type of behaviour. And so we got the dollhouse out and the people, and we actually said, I'm going to pretend that we're at your house and I'm going to cook dinner, and you can be dad and I'll be mum and this can be you. Let's pretend we're going to get ready for dinner and dad's coming home. And so she actually acted out domestic violence. So, and using the dollhouse or puppets is a very, very good way of actually getting children to share and talk about their experiences. That's why Home Corner is a wonderful place for children to be able to act out their concerns and traumas. And that's why your home corners or your dramatic play areas in your services must be well equipped with great props and encourage children to go and access those. And when you're in those spaces, you know, ask questions such as, oh, who cooks dinner at home? And what happens when dad comes home from work? Do you eat dinner together? You know, all those types of things. We don't ask questions like, does daddy hurt mummy, or did mummy and daddy yell at each other? We definitely don't ask that. That's a very leading question, and that's not appropriate. But we might say things like, oh, what are you going to have for dinner at home tonight? And do you eat together as a family? Those types of things. And children will start sharing information. Most of the time, 99.9% of the time, children's family units are going to be very, very normal and very safe. Okay, however, for those children that you do see challenging behaviours or concerns or aggression or withdrawal, anxiety, you may maybe start to see some other types of abuse indicators coming through. Some of the indicators for sexual abuse for physical are things like genital injuries and bite marks, usually around the thighs and buttocks. The child may have sexual behaviour or explicit sexual knowledge. So some of the things that children will do is have directional type play, where they might say, no, you do this and I'm going to do that. Okay. They might even be quite promiscuous in their affection seeking. So when they try and give you a cuddle, they might try and touch you in the private areas, and they might even see excessive masturbation. So some children will masturbate at rest time, and that is very, very normal. And it's very normal for children to want to see each other's private parts in the bathrooms. They start to see differences around about the age of 4 and 5. That's very normal. However, when children engage in masturbation and they ask others to watch or join in, or they're doing that at any time of the day, and they really don't respond to boundaries, then that is a concern. So if children are engaging in self-soothing at rest time, that is okay. That's very normal, and it's quite common in children under the age of 4. Some of the behavioural indicators are you're going to see persistent and inappropriate sexual play with toys. You might even see it in their drawings. They might even show a fear of going home as well. You might even see anxiety states and changes in their appetite. Now, in terms of neglect, indicators of neglect, you might see unattended medical and dental needs, a lack of supervision. The child may have ingested things like alcohol, drugs, cleaning products, medication, etc. They might have hunger or nutritional deficiencies, or they might show obesity because they're eating way too much bad food. You might see persistent and untreated conditions, things like scabies, head lice, nappy rash, to extreme. Okay, so head lice doesn't mean a child's being neglected, but ongoing head lice infestation, scalp is being, its red raw state, the child is extremely unwell because of it, then that is obviously neglect. Some of the behavioural indicators, you might see things like the child demands your attention because they're obviously not getting attention. They might tell you they're hungry. They might seem tired all the time. They might lack trust. They might seem unpredictable. And the emotional and logical, you're going to see things like the child saying, I feel sick all the time. I've got a tummy ache, nausea, headaches. They're psychosomatic complaints. So they might have bedwetting, diarrhea, etc. You think about those children that are going through a separation anxiety and the extreme anxiety, and they vomit. They make themselves actually vomit. So that's fine because they're going through separation anxiety and we can manage that. But children who are doing this all the time, they're saying they feel sick, they have a headache, and they are vomiting all the time, even once they've settled into childcare, this may be a child who has got emotional or psychological harm or experiencing trauma. Some of the mental behavioural indicators are cognitive or mental and emotional developmental lags. They seem immature for their age. Their behaviour is quite inappropriate, so again, immature for their age. There is a fear of failure. They actually have withdrawal and aggressiveness as well. Or some children may actually show sort of OCD type behaviour, so excessive neatness and cleanliness, because if they're not, they get into a lot of trouble at home. And domestic violence. So whether or not parents are engaging in arguments or psychological harm or physical abuse in front of the children or behind closed doors, it does not matter. Children are still exposed to this because they're hearing it, they're seeing the aftermath. And some of the indicators for this might be sleeping and eating difficulties due to anxiety. The children may have physical injuries. They might show defiant or aggressive behaviours because they're learning this at home, they're seeing this as normal. And they might also become quite overprotective of their siblings or the parent who's being harmed. What we have to understand too is it's about one every 7 days a woman dies from domestic violence, one man every 10 days. So while women are obviously I guess the statistics of women are higher than men in being victims of domestic violence, men are also victims of domestic violence, especially psychological harm as well. So we can't just always think that it's going to be the mums that are being abused. Dads can also be in that situation too. What we have to understand is that we need to put this into context. If you ever have concerns about a child, if they ever say anything or showing behaviours or physical indicators, you need to document this. You need to talk with your room leader and your director. If you don't know what questions to ask the child, then you hand it over to someone and let them know straight away. Not next week, not tomorrow, but straight away, and say, this child just said this, and that person can then go and engage with the child. The best question that you can ask is, can you just say what happened? Okay, so you need to keep it simple. Don't ask leading information. Don't say, oh, what did you do that was naughty? Don't say, did they use this? Did daddy do it too? Okay, what you need to say is, can you tell me what happened? And if a child said something like, mummy hit me when I spilt the orange juice, you can say, can you tell me what happened then when you spilt the orange juice? Use the child's words, but always just use, can you tell me what happened? Never ask why, because if you ask why, that's very abstract for a child. If we say, why did mummy do it? They then have to try and get inside their mum's mind and emotional feelings and understand why their mum did it. And most of the time, if abuse is happening, parents can either be because of mental health issues, drug and alcohol abuse, stress, and sometimes the parents don't even know why they're doing it. They just react. Okay, so never ever ask the children, why did that happen? Always just ask, can you tell me what happened? What happened next? You might even say, who else was there? Okay, so it's really important that you keep it very, very simple. So mandatory reporters, who is a mandatory reporter? Well, you are a mandatory reporter. It is anyone who is working with children or supervising those that work with children. And it means that you as the individual are responsible to make the report if you suspect abuse or someone discloses it to you. So even if the child doesn't tell you what's happening and you suspect it because you're seeing a change in behaviour, you're seeing some indicators, you put it through the MRG and you follow the instructions on the MRG. It is a legal requirement, okay, so it is the law. It doesn't mean that you pass on your information to your director and they do it. Okay, you as the individual, it's not the centre, but you as the individual are responsible to do that, and you can sit down with your director and do it with them. You will be using what we call Child Story or the Mandatory Reporter Guidance Tool. It is part of our New South Wales legislation, and there is a link there for you so that you can have a look at that and explore that in your own time. It is really important that you know how to access it. Usually I just Google MRG online and it will come up obviously with the website. So what happens if we do report it and it doesn't meet the risk of significant harm? So if it doesn't meet significant harm, don't worry too much, okay? It means that, and it will tell you exactly what to do, which is what's fantastic about this. You basically continue to document, you support your family, and you contact Child Protection Services for advice. The most important thing is that we have relationships with our families, that we have open communication, that we greet them in the morning, we greet them in the afternoon, we talk to them about their child's day. We know what's happening. I know whenever I've been an educator or a director, parents have always been very open to tell me what's happening in their household. I've had parents come in and say, our household is not very happy at the moment because dad's lost his job and we're stressed. You know, I just need to talk to someone. And I would say to them, come on, let's get some support in place for you guys. It's not about dobbing them in. It's about saying, let's get some support in place now before it escalates. It's about being proactive. I've had a single father, where I could see signs of neglect for his child. And I sat with him in the office one day and said, listen, I can see, things are not going well for you guys. Can you talk to me what's happening? He'd lost his job. He was going to reduce the child's days. The child was going to school. It was coming up to Christmas. He couldn't afford Christmas presents. He couldn't afford to buy clothes for the child. The child was outgrowing his clothes. They were pretty much eating baked beans for dinner. And I basically said to him, listen, before this escalates, let's get some support in place for you. Let's ring community services or child protection, and let's get you some counselling, get you some support in finding another job. I was fortunate enough to be in a centre where we could actually give him free childcare for a period of 3 months, because we were a community-based services and non-for-profit, so we were very lucky that our budget allowed us to do that. And also too, I said to my cook, when you cook our lunches, this child comes 4 days a week. What I want you to do is cook an extra portion, pop it in this container, put it on the this level of the fridge, and Dad's going to come in and take that home. So every night they were able to have a cooked meal. I also put a note up on our front door and said to parents, we need size 4 and 5 boys' clothes for summer for our spare clothes box. And many of our parents were very generous, and they would either go and buy stuff, even just from Kmart, and leave it there, and or donate clothes that their children had outgrown. I was able to pass those on to Dad. We also did a giving tree every year, which parents donated a gift with either male or female tag on it on the age, wrapped up under the Christmas tree, and the Salvos and Vinnies would come and collect those for families less fortunate. Well, before they came and collected those presents, I took out about 4 for a 5-year-old boy and passed those on to Dad. And so he was able then to give his son Christmas presents. No one else knew what was going on. Obviously, the staff knew, but no other families knew this family was in hardship. I didn't want to embarrass the dad. So all of these donations, parents thought they were obviously for our giving tree and just for our spare clothes box. So we can support families at this local level. You can have a community pantry in your foyer where parents, donate. They might say, oh, I bought too much pasta this week. I'm going to take that to the centre, put that in the pantry for someone who may need that. But, oh gosh, I can see tinned tomatoes and that would be great for me. So we do this sharing. We bring in one thing and we can take another. This is great for families that are going through a little bit of financial hardship and possibly a marriage breakdown, stress and anxiety, mental health. And so say, for example, mum might be unwell and dad's struggling. Well, he might be able to, pick up something from the centre to make life a little bit easier for him, or vice versa. So it's really important that we actually look at this and go, right, if it says just continue to document and support the family, can I support this family? Do I know how to support this family? Would I feel comfortable supporting this family, or am I just going to pretend it's not happening? So we need to get proactive about this and build really strong partnerships. So if a child does disclose abuse to you, you need to think about, what do I do? You must always believe the child. You must reassure the child that telling you was the right thing to do. Try and maintain a calm appearance. Find a quiet place to talk. You don't want to be sitting down the sandpit with, 5 other children. They're all listening to it, and then they go home and tell their parents. Let your director know, your 2IC, your room leader, and document this, and then do the MRG. So always believe the child. It doesn't matter who the child is, how much of a storyteller they are. You must believe that child. Tell the child, I'm so glad that you've told me. I'm a safe person and I will always believe you. Try and maintain a calm appearance. Don't sort of go, oh no, or start crying, or put your hands over your mouth, because the child is actually going to think you're responding to them. They're going to think that you think they are terrible or disgusting or sad or whatever. Maintain a calm appearance, open body language. Okay, don't cross your arms or legs. Keep your body open. Maintain that calm facial appearance, and just don't talk yet. Don't talk. Just listen to the child and then respond calmly. So say a child tells you something, and you're inside your mind, you're going, oh no, this is terrible. So when the child's finished talking, all I would say is, thank you for telling me, Patrick, because you know that I'm a safe person and I'll always believe you. Can you tell me what happened next? Or can you tell me what happened when Mummy pushed you this morning? Okay, now if we're in the sandpit, I would say something like, Patrick, you know what, I forgot to go and check on this today, or I forgot to water the vegetable garden. Could you come and help me, please? Now, the other children might say, we want to come too. I'll say, that's okay, we're going to be back in a few moments. You stay there. Come on, Patrick, I need your big, strong muscles, okay? Or whatever. Make up something to get them so that you can just go for a walk, and have a chat. And as you're walking and there's no one else listening, no other children listening to the conversation, you can say the same thing. Thank you for telling me that, Patrick. Thank you for telling me, because I'm a safe person and I will always believe you. Can you tell me what happened this morning when Mummy pushed you? Who else was there? What happened next? Listen to what the child is saying. Try and take it all in. Okay, you need to really listen to what the child's saying, because as soon as he finishes telling you, say, thank you for sharing that with me. If you ever want to tell me anything again, or you feel scared or frightened or worried, you can always come and talk to me or any of the other teachers. Come on, we'll go back to the sandpit. Once he's settled back in the sandpit, you then go and you document everything, and you talk to your director or your room leader, your next in charge, and then you complete the MRG. Now, whether or not you choose to talk to the family about this upon pickup is up to your director and yourself, because some situations you could make worse. So if the child says, Mummy hit me, and then you say to Mum this afternoon, he told me that you hit him, it's highly likely you're going to make that situation worse. She may abuse you. She may then take this child home and abuse this child even further. We don't know what mental frame of mind parents are in, or anyone is in. So the best thing that I would do is document and report it to Child Protection and let them deal with that. If, for example, the child says something like, Mummy was really sad this morning and she was crying, and I don't know why, you might mention that to Mum. You might say, oh, look, Patrick told me this morning that you're a bit upset. Is everything okay? Remember, we're here to help you as well. Okay, or you might feel comfortable letting your director do that. Okay, so again, build relationships, but we don't want to place children in situations where parents are going to get angry at them and take it out further on them. That's really important. Okay, so have discussions first about whether you're going to raise it with the family or whether this just needs to go straight to Child Protection Services. So basically, once you've completed the MRG, what happens? So let's have a look on the left side here. The MRG says support the family and document. So keep documenting. So of course you're going to inform your supervisor and other educators in the room so they are aware if they see unusual things. Keep documenting any concerns you have and file it away in a safe place. And support the child and the family, and document your support that you're providing and document how they respond to that support. So you have to keep building like a profile, because as soon as that parent says, hey, back away, stop supporting me, stay out of it, and you're not seeing any changes in the child, then that actually can become reportable. Okay, so you may keep doing the MRG every week, depending on what's happening. If, however, you do the MRG and it says, yes, this is reportable, you obviously let your supervisor and other educators in the room know, you contact Child Protection Services, and you support the child and make any further reports when necessary. Even if you have reported to Child Protection Services, say next week something else happens, something new, you then report it again. Okay, so you keep reporting. It is so important to do that. Don't just think because you've already told Child Protection that it's okay now. You must keep reporting in case there's more things going on. Then Child Protection will see it needs to be escalated up the line, and someone needs to go out and see the family. If they do go out and see the family, the child will not be removed unless the abuser is in the household and it is something like severe sexual or psychological physical harm, or the abuser will be asked to remove, or the abuser will be removed, obviously, in the case of sexual and physical abuse. It just depends on the family context, obviously. Most of the time, someone will go into the service and they will support the family, teach them new skills, get them counselling, those sorts of things, unless, of course, it is a very high level type of abuse, and then action will be taken. So how do we actually make the report? Well, we complete the MRG and we follow the instructions. Your centre should have an incident form, and basically you write down as much detail, and the sorts of information your incident form will ask for is the child's name, their age, the centre that they go to, the days they attend, the family situation, so is it mum, single parent, grandparents, etc., cultural background, the address, any siblings, because the school, if they've got older siblings, the school may have put a report in as well, any custody issues, mental health and drug and alcohol issues if you're aware of them, what the indicators and signs are that you've seen and heard and witnessed, what the child has said, and any other relevant information such as a drawing, a photo of a bruise. We don't ask children to pose, or we don't say, lift up your shirt, I'm going to take a photo of that bruise. If you see it on their arm, obviously, and you can get a photo quite easily without the child knowing, that's great. But we'd never ever ask the child to pose for a photo, because they might then tell their parent, and the parent will obviously become very distressed and could actually harm the child further. What I'm going to do now, though, is I'm going to show you the MRG. Now, some of you may have seen this before. So let me just move across to this screen sharing. So you just have to bear with me. Oh. And so I think, sorry guys, I think when we are looking at the MRG, we need to understand too, you're not going to get in trouble if you put a report through on a child. Okay, you're not going to get in trouble if you put a report through and it comes back that that's not happening. The worst case scenario is that you do the MRG and it says that it is reportable and you choose not to report it, okay? Because what you're actually doing is then condoning the abuse. What you must understand is that, sorry, I'm just having issues with the screen sharing at the moment. What you need to understand is that if you choose not to report it and it is reportable, then you have pretty much condoned the abuse. The best case scenario is doing the MRG and it gets investigated and nothing's happening. You won't get in trouble for that, okay? So that is the best case scenario, and I strongly suggest that you that if the MRG says it's reportable, that you do report it. Okay, it will probably get investigated, and if nothing comes about, then that is fantastic. Okay, so please just be mindful of that, because a lot of the time people say, oh, but what if I report it and I get in trouble? You won't get in trouble. You can actually remain anonymous. Okay, so I'm just going to get the screen sharing happening now so I can bring up the MRG. So sorry, it's just connecting for me. Now with the MRG, I'm just going to click through this and sorry, I'm just going to okay, I'm just going to click through this quickly. Okay, so what you should now see is a new screen, which has got, you know, what is mandatory reporting, etc. Okay, so we're going to click on this one here, which says start the MRG. And down here, we've got all these lovely decision trees. Okay, so what we do is we click on those. So say, for example, I've got a child. I'm just going to move this so I can just see what you are seeing. I've got a child who comes in and says, I say, oh gosh, Benjamin, that's a big bruise on your back. How did that happen? And the child says, oh, mummy hit me this morning. And I say, oh, Benjamin, can you tell me what happened this morning when mummy hit you? Well, I was trying to pour my orange juice and I dropped the whole container. It fell onto mummy's new rug and mummy got so angry and she hit me in my back. I said, okay. Was anyone else there? And he goes, no, just mummy. Okay, so what happened next? Mummy then pushed me up against the wall. Okay, or mummy screamed at me and told me to go to my room. Okay, so I could also ask things like, has that happened before? Has mummy hit you like that before or pushed you like that before? And the child may say yes, depending on the child's age. If the child is young, that can be very confusing, okay? So always be aware that sometimes the age of the child will obviously have to adapt our questions. So in a real case scenario, you would have to read the definitions on this over here, definitions and questions, okay? So this part over here. What I'm going to do is just click through the answers. Are you aware of an injury? Yes, we are. Has it been caused by a parent? Yes, or a carer. Is it significant? Yes, it is, because there is a bruise on the child's torso, and that is a significant bruise, again, under the definitions. Do we have any other concerns? Not this time. I don't have any other concerns about this child. Do I have any other concerns about a class of children? No. So it's not a classroom or a group of children, it's just one child. Straight away it says it's immediate report to child protection. It actually tells me the phone number and everything. Now in real life, I would click on this, generate the PDF. It's just a PDF file. So if I click on that, it's going to come up as a form that I can print off. The great thing about this is when it gets generated, here it comes. You can obviously put the child's details up in that top box up there, completed by and the date that it's completed by. It is an immediate report, and also too we've got a summary of why this needs to be reported down the bottom here under those blue hyperlinks. Okay, now it's also got some hyperlinks there that are going to help you support this child too. Now, if that came up as it's not reportable, so say for example on the MRG it says continue to document, support the family, etc., or get some advice, you still can generate that. You can still print it off and obviously put it in the child's file. Now, sometimes it will have an e-report here or have a hyperlink and you can click that through. That is obviously really emergency situations, but you wouldn't do that if you're just having a play with it. You would do that in a real life situation. So it is very, very user friendly. What I would suggest though, if you ever do the MRG, always print it off and put it in a secure file. If it says it is immediate report to child protection, you must do that. You must contact. Okay, that is very, very important. Okay, so I'm just now going to go back to the other screen. Just bear with me. And, oh, end that. Sorry. So I just want to finish up by saying that protection is everyone's responsibility. As educators, we must advocate for the rights of all children. It is really important to feel confident in your role as an early childhood advocate. It is important that you understand the indicators of child abuse. It is important that you understand that you can access the MRG. You must understand your child's child protection policy and the incident forms. Never just turn a blind eye. Never just think, oh, someone else will do it. You may be that child's basically, saving grace. So if you're ever in doubt, the best thing to do is document and just talk to your director and contact Child Protection Services for advice. They will let you know whether things are reportable or not, and they will be able to take your concerns over the phone as well. So thank you very much for listening to this webinar. I hope that's given you shed some light on your roles and responsibilities. You will now need to complete the questions that come with this, so please then click on the next link in your schedule and complete the survey as you've got all this information in your mind, and that will come through to me. Thanks very much. If you have any further questions, feel free to email me or discuss this with your service director.